Morning, everybody. Chris here. Welcome back to 30-Day Excel Analyst. This is data analysis week. So we're dealing with one of our 4 key skill areas in Excel, which is analyzing data, something not just Excel analysts, but professionals out there are doing all the time. And today we're going to build a simple dashboard. I love a dashboard in Excel, something that's easy to use, something with some interactive features, maybe some buttons to click, allows me to get exactly the information I need, but not easy to build. So over the course of the next 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through step by step my quick and easy method for developing an Excel dashboard that allows you to analyze what we call discrete data. We'll get onto that in a second, what exactly discrete data is. If you're watching live, thank you so much for being with us. Leave me a message in the chat. I'll deal with those in the session. If you're watching on replay, thank you for joining us. Leave me a comment below. I will get back to you there, help you on your way through 30-Day Excel Analyst. It's day 10, and hopefully we're well on the way to transforming your analytical skill set. So with that said, data analysis week, this is our overview slide. So data analysis, well, it's one of the 4 Excel key skills. It's the process of making sense of a data set. And as I said, you know, the thing people most easily associate with Excel, perhaps, and something you're going to be doing all the time as an Excel analyst. So yesterday, we looked at analyzing what we call a continuous data set, continuous numerical data set. We saw how we can use the frequency formula and a host of other formulae to really tell the story of that data set and produce a beautiful visual. On the subject of beautiful visuals, that's what we're aiming for today, but not with continuous data, not with that numerical data. Today, we're looking at discrete data. What we call discrete data generally refers to text-based data, although as we're going to see, numerical data can also be discrete. For example, when you're using numbers to describe categories, or for example, rating someone's performance on a scale of 1 to 5. So this data is discrete. It's a limited number of possible values. That means we have a different set of techniques to do the analysis. Yes, the technique selection, that comes from understanding the nature of the data you're analyzing. And what about pivot tables? Do you get on well with pivot tables? I avoided pivot tables for the first 3 or 4 years of my career. Yes, I was a professional Excel analyst, and I didn't even use pivot tables, but that's a good thing in one way because I found some really good alternatives. But as I've gone through my career, I've got more confident with pivot tables. And it's true. The easiest way to create what somebody would call an Excel dashboard, a real wow factor on a project, is using pivot tables and slices, as we're going to see. So what's an Excel dashboard? Well, I've got an example here. I always think it's a bit like your car dashboard. The purpose of a car dashboard is to communicate information really succinctly and precisely, information that's really important when you're driving. You know, you need to know your speed, for example. Are you driving at a safe speed? So my inspiration for an Excel dashboard is car dashboards. And this doesn't look like a car dashboard, but I like to think we've brought through some of the principles that a car dashboard designer is trying to bring through. For example, it's clean and consistent. There's a coherent color scheme, a limited number of colors, and they're coherent. I take color scheme inspiration from a company logo. Then I use an online color scheme generator to generate a color scheme. There's a chart at the top. So you're being invited to interpret the data via a visual medium first, and then later and optionally via a numerical medium, in this case, a table later. There's a sense of layering. Next time you're in your car dashboard, you're in your car, appreciate the sense of layering on the dashboard. The most important information stands out, for example, your speed, and then less important information. You can access that, but it's at the next layer down. So there's a sense of layering in this dashboard. There's interactive features. We're going to look at how to use slices and, time permitting, even a timeline. Beautiful interactive features that Excel kind of builds for us. We're going to look at how to put those in, and that can get your user interacting with the data. If your user is doing something with the data, that means they're going to understand it better. That means they're playing. That means they're going to have a better experience. And space as well. So not too cramped here. There's some areas of space that kind of keep it easy on the eye and mean it's fairly straightforward to digest. So this is what I mean by an Excel dashboard. There's a download file available. Link is in the video description below. Go ahead and download that file because we've got our briefing here. This is what we're going to try to do. So your client is a construction company in the UK. The UK contracts subcontractors to work on its building sites, and there's approximately 12. Although I think I reduced that to 5 in this data set. Anyway, there's some building sites. We'll see that each month project managers are required to evaluate the performance of each subcontractor on 5 metrics on a scale of 1 to 5. So what's that? Well, it's numerical, it's 1 to 5, but it's an example of discrete numerical data. It's not continuous, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. The company wishes to collect the data periodically to understand who the better contractors are, and for example, if performance varies from one site to another before contracting you for a project. The company wishes to see what might be possible in Excel based on the data set provided. Link in the video description below. Create a simple dashboard and demonstrate how Excel could be used to help the company. So as I said, make sure you go ahead and download the download file. In the download file, you'll find a dashboard sheet. This is where we want to get to. Now, I'm having to adjust the zoom level here. That's only because I use a zoom-in display for a zoomed-in display for online presentation. It means you can see things like the ribbons at the top. Generally, with a dashboard, you shouldn't be asking the user to zoom in or zoom out. I do all my Excel work on zoom level 100. I highly recommend that. Anyway, this is what we're working towards. Something like this. We've got interactivity. Interactive features. We've got a timeline. We've got these sites here. This is all possible with an Excel dashboard. I can go ahead and remove the filters here, and we're back to what we started with. This is what we're aiming for. We're not going to get this far, but we are going to put the main parts in, and you'll be in a situation where you can kind of add your own touches and complete the details yourself. This is what the data looks like. Now, does this data remind you of anything? Remind you anything so far from 30-day Excel Analyst? Well, what about when we did data collection? In data management, we looked at different ways to collect and collate data in Excel, and I highly recommend learning how to use forms, Google Forms or Microsoft Forms to collect data in Excel. Then you can even apply Power Query to get it into a desktop Excel file. And your data is going to look something like this. And this data could have been collected. Looking at the nature of the data, it could have been collected via an online form. So hopefully you can see the meta themes in the course, all of these techniques meshing together over time. So we've got a sequence number, we've got a date, and it looks like they're collecting data each month. So I can see February, March, going through the months there. We've got all our different contractor names. So I can see for each month, we've got 12 contractors. So for each month, there's 1 entry per contractor. We've got our different sites they're working on there. And then for each of the 5 metrics, we've got punctuality, safety, communication, teamwork, and leadership. Each contractor is being rated from 1 to 5 here. So a quick note on this data. What's the quality of this data? What's the level of quality? It's very high quality data, this. Yeah, I can't see any blanks. I can't see any text where the numbers should be. I can't see any numbers outside of the range, which is 1 to 5. So what does that tell us? Well, there's been good data validation has happened, whether that's happened in a spreadsheet, whether that's happened via an online form, and maybe some data cleansing has happened as well via Power Query, maybe with, converted some values, put a formula in, who knows what it might be. So we've gone through those processes. That's all in Data Management Week, guys. So sessions 5 to 9, I believe, on 30-day Excel Analyst, you can find out about data management. So this is our starting point. And we're going to try to move towards, in the next 10 minutes or so, something like that dashboard. And this is going to happen via a pivot table. Not a pivot table. That would be my reaction. Even up to a couple of years ago, that's how I would have reacted if someone had suggested, let's use a pivot table. I've selected all the data first. Now, my data is actually tabulated, I believe. So when we select pivot table here, we've got the option to select a table or range. This is the name of my table. It will be named that way in your file as well, in the download file, data import table. And we can choose, where do we want to put the pivot table? I recommend putting it on a new worksheet. So we can put OK here. And we're into our pivot table interface. And this is one of the things I really struggled with when I was getting started with pivot tables. What on earth is this interface? What on earth is this interface? So what's a good tip for navigating this interface? It's having a sense of where you want to get to. Having a sense of where you want to get to. Excel is very powerful. not telepathic. So Excel can't jump in your head and work out what you're thinking. So can you sketch it out? I always use pen and paper first to sketch things out. I recommend using pen and paper. What do you want it to look like? And what are the key questions that you want to answer? Now, in our situation, we've got the advantage of having already built the dashboard. So I have a sense of the kind of columns, just the metrics that I'm interested in: safety, communication, teamwork, leadership, and punctuality, and then the contractor names here. So I'm just taking the general impression of what I want and converting that into column headers here. So what column headers are of interest to me? Well, clearly the name, looking at that table, the name, and then we're going to pick out maybe just three of the metrics. Let's go for punctuality, safety, and communication. So what we can do is add those to the pivot table. So how to do that? Just going to go ahead and tick name. And in the background, Excel has kind of guessed at what I might want to do. I can see the names in there. Fantastic. And then we were interested in some of these metrics. I'm going to go for the first three metrics. So punctuality, safety, and communication here. Punctuality, safety, communication. Now, once again, my display is quite zoomed in so that you can actually see it on YouTube. Yours will probably be a bit easier to navigate than this. So this gives us the sum. We're more interested in an average. Yesterday, we spoke about the different metrics when you might want each one. We want to get to an average here. That's more informative than a sum. How would we get to an average? Well, we've got to go down to the values box here, and you can see punctuality has gone in there automatically. That's great. We want to go to value field settings. Then we want to change this to an average. And we can see we've got the average in there. Let's go to safety here, value field settings. We want average. And then finally, let's go to communication, value field settings, and just doing the same thing here. And now we've got our averages in. So already we're doing a lot of analysis here, different ways to get this analysis. Yeah, 30-day Excel analysts, we are critical consumers. I'm not saying this is the best for the job all the time, but if we were to use Excel's data analysis formulae, and I'll give you an example in this session, we're going to cover these tomorrow. If we were to use Excel's data analysis formulae to create this analysis, it's all possible using formulae. It would have taken a lot more time to set up those formulae. So there's an advantage of pivot tables. If you do know what you're doing, you can get it set up quite quickly. One thing that does annoy me about pivot tables is the decimal places. So we want to be consistent with the decimal places. Is that an appropriate number of decimal places? Probably not. Is this an appropriate number of decimal places? Probably not. So what's the number of decimal places that works for you? Generally, 2 decimal places seems to work pretty well. And you can see that's completely uncluttered the interface there. Nice. Right, I want to validate this. So as Excel analysts, we're always looking to validate what we're doing. Can we do one thing 2 different ways? It will also help us appreciate a different approach and the pros and cons of each. So that's a critical perspective. So what we're saying is for Ari's projects, the average of punctuality is 2.58. So I want to do that a different way in order to kind of believe the pivot table. So we're going to do this using an average ifs formula. I'm just going to create a bit of room here, Alt H O W and 5. Let's go average ifs. Now we spoke about average ifs briefly yesterday. We would have touched on it anyway. So average ifs is going to give us an average of some filtered entries. Now, what does Excel want? So Excel wants the average range. We're talking about punctuality. So punctuality is the column that we want to get the average from. So you can see I've selected the whole column. Now, because I'm using a table, you can see we've got the table notation here going into the column. Now the criteria range. So we want to filter by a particular column and specify a criteria and only include those rows in the calculations. What's the column we're interested in? Well, we're interested in the name. So Control Shift down here, and then the criteria is Ari. I'm going to type this in with the speech marks around it. This is our criteria. So we've got an average range, we've got a criteria range, and we've got a criteria. You can see with average ifs, we could continue. You can put 3, 4, 5 criteria in here, I believe, however many you want. So it's given us an answer of 2.58. So Ari's average performance for punctuality is 2.58, and I can see that confirmed in the table. So quick validation exercise using Excel's data analysis formulae. And if you're excited by that formula, I love the data analysis formulae. We are covering those tomorrow. You can choose which one works best for you, a pivot table or the formula-based approach. In the video description below, we've got a video called Why I Don't Use Pivot Tables. I go through the pros and cons of each there. Cool. So what else might we want to do here? Well, we can see on a dashboard, we said, a principle of Excel dashboards is you invite your user to interpret the data visually first rather than throwing a table at them. So how to do that? Well, we've already set up our pivot table. If you've done that, we can then go to pivot chart. And now again, we're going to see the power of pivot tables. You can choose whatever chart works for you. In this situation, I like this idea of this clustered column chart. So we've got each member, each staff name, and then we've got one column for each metric: punctuality, safety, and communication there. That does the job. That does the job for me. And what we'll see here is, yes, we've got a visual in here, and you can even use the option here to do some filtering if you want to do that. So Ari, we can see 2.58, 2.25, and 2.17. So a slightly smaller value as we're going through Ari's entries there. So once again, just a very quick validation check to confirm what's going on. But in terms of layout, how could we move towards what we've got here? How could we get the chart to the top? Well, now we're going to appreciate some of the difficulties of pivot tables because we want to move it around. Yeah. And pivot tables, even just doing a simple filter here, they automatically change their appearance. So I'm just going to put a quick filter on. Let's look at Barry here. You can see the appearance changing and the chart automatically changes. That's nice and interactive, but it does create a sense of a lack of predictability here about how this dashboard is actually going to look. You can learn to manage that over time. I've learned to manage it, and you'll see how I manage it a little bit in this session. So I've just hit Shift and Spacebar there, and then Control Shift and Plus. Just want to create a bit of room at the top here. I'm going to depart for a second, and then I'm going to go Control and Spacebar, Control Shift and Plus. Just looking to create a bit of room here, a bit of room to put the chart at the top, Alt-HOW3 here, and I'd call these columns spacer columns to give a sense of space on the left, just to make the dashboard, feel like it's framed and make it look a little bit nicer here. Now I'm using the Alt key to line up the chart here, lining it up with the grid lines there. So already not looking too bad. Admittedly, a lot to do, but not looking too bad. We've got a nice chart and a nice table there. Okay, cool. So what about manipulating this dashboard? We've got the principle of interactivity here. So we want to be able to press a button. We want something to happen. We want our user to get into that play mode where they love using the dashboard. That's going to help them understand the data. That's going to make them want to work with you even more. I can guarantee that. So yeah, we can use the filter, but the filter, it's a lot of button clicks. And generally, you want to avoid filtering as far as possible. It just takes a lot of effort to operate those filters. So what are the options here? Well, slices. Absolutely love slices. So I've clicked on the pivot table. I'm going to go to insert slices. I love how simple it is to put this in. So a slicer, we're going to see what they look like in a second, but let's propose or implement a substitute for this name filter. I can just go name here and okay. Suddenly we've got our little slicer box here. How cool is that? And we can now, I'm going to use the Alt key again to line this up. I'm just going to have a spacer column here, Alt-HOW3. So using the same column width for the spacer columns there. And now how cool is this? So if I just want to look at Barry's data, I can just hit the slicer there. Want to look at Carrie, I can hit the slicer there. If I want to make multiple selections, I can click this multiple selection option. And you see how suddenly it's interactive. And I find managers, customers absolutely love this. If you want to remove the slicers, you can remove them right there. What other dimensions might you want to look at? Well, we mentioned the site to begin with, didn't we? So if we go to Pivot Table Analyze, insert slicer again, so you can have any number of slices. So we want a site in there, we can hit OK. And now we're going to have two slices working together. So I want another spacer column, Alt HOW3 here, holding down the Alt key. Just about see that in your screenshot. And now when I select Barry, for example, I'm only going to have the option. What's happened there? I just deselected Barry. So if I select Ari and then go to site, I can see, okay, what's Ari's performance on this particular site? Very nice. So very easy there. You can see very easy to put one or more metrics to filter by one or more column using those slices. And going back to our example dashboard, that's exactly what these are down here. Now, I've gone for putting the interactive controls at the bottom. That just seems to make sense intuitively to me. But there's an argument for putting the dashboard controls at the top. Maybe you'd want to flip this setup I've got, put the dashboard controls at the top. That's where they're most accessible. So finally today, let's have a look at dealing with dates here. Dates, very tricky in Excel generally, and they get even more tricky when you're looking to analyze by dates. So suppose your customer said, I just want to look at data from a particular month. I want to look at data from a particular quarter. Well, pivot tables, pivot charts, and slices, we've got a great option for this. So once again, let's remove filters. Let's click on the pivot table here. And let's go to insert timeline, insert timeline. Very clever what goes on in the background. Excel looks through the table and looks for kind of qualifying columns. So what columns will qualify? Well, it's only columns that have date information that will qualify here. And then we get this beautiful little timeline option. Once again, I'm struggling a bit for space. So it's not going to display super well on my zoomed in setup here, but you're going to be able to get the idea. So we've got months here. So let's suppose we just want to look at data in January. I just click January there and you can see everything updating. Got some nice options here. Suppose I just want to look at quarter three. I can hit quarter three and then we can see that data updating there. So yeah, it's admittedly, it's not quite as sophisticated as this, but later in 30-day Excel Analyst, we have a session on formatting. And we'll talk more about these formatting techniques. But it's fairly simple, guys. It's fairly simple to get from this using Excel formatting to something more like this. And this is my super quick and easy method for building interactive dashboards for discrete data in Excel. So now's a good time, guys. You want to get a comment in the chat. I'll go through the comments in a second, deal with any questions there. Thanks so much for being with me, guys. Thanks so much to the live viewers who support us so well here on the channel. You know, it really means a lot. You turning out every day. And yeah, if I can create any value in terms of answering a question here, very happy to do that. But we will be looking tomorrow at an alternative to pivot tables. So this example, it's a little bit contrived. Yeah, the data is very much set up for pivot tables. It's very high quality data. There's no issues there in terms of data cleansing. So it's a very smooth example of how to use a pivot table. Now, in real life, you're likely to have a few problems with the pivot table. As I said, the layout of the pivot table, how it automatically updates, that can really mess up your aesthetic. You know, you can create a beautiful dashboard and then the pivot table updates. That's just one example of the kind of problem you'll have. So Excel formulae is a nice additional option, a nice alternative. And we looked at the average ifs formula. We're going to look at other formulae tomorrow, and then you can weigh it up yourself. You know, you're a critical consumer now, 30-day Excel analyst. You can weigh it up yourself. What's going to work best in your situation? But the best place to be is, of course, to have both techniques available, appreciate the pros and cons of each, and to be able to deploy both techniques in your data analysis work. Right, let's see who's with us today. So Arnie's with us. Arnie, you've been a regular supporter, so thank you so much. Lee's with us. How are you doing, Lee? Jorgen is with us. Let's salute the general this morning. Kieran with us too. How are you doing, Kieran? Michelle, 2 days in a row, Michelle. Always fantastic to see you. Marcus tuning in. How are you doing? Heavy Downpour is back. I don't think you were with us yesterday, Heavy Downpour, but thanks for joining us today. And Lee's absolutely right. You know, I hate pivot tables when setting them up. You're not the only one, Lee. I can absolutely guarantee. I hope you've taken a few tips from earlier in the session about how I set them up. I think having a clear idea what you're trying to do which columns are important in your analysis. That's certainly one step towards kind of de-stressing the process. Maz, how are you doing, my friend? So Maz, thanks for all of the comments you've been leaving on the videos. I know all them. I think I've responded to most of them. Maz says, is there any way to work with data from a MySQL, I think database? Would love to be able to upload, download data from MySQL in real time. I'm not sure, but I would think so. So last week we did data management, Maz. So you can go to get data and you should have an option here. There you go. You got the SQL server database there, and you got another SQL option here. I'm not an expert in SQL, but that's certainly something I've heard of people doing. So check out data and those get data options, Maz. So good luck with that. Yeah, and Heavy Downpour says, apologies for yesterday, was busy in the garden, forgot we had the class this week. Thanks as always, Chris. It's an absolute pleasure, my friend. Yeah, and on that note, I hope you're able to implement your own Excel dashboard. As I said, if you're watching on replay, leave me a comment below. Let me know how you're doing tomorrow. Excel data analysis, formulae, one of my absolute favorites. I will see you there, same time, same place for more from 30-Day Excel Analyst. Take care.